I'm James Helder. Welcome to Full Goal Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by former QPR, Gillingham, Bournemouth, Newcastle United, Chelsea, Queen's Park Rangers, Charlton Athletic star, none other than Gavin Peacock. How are you, Gav? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right, James. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Firstly, thank you ever so much for making a bit of time for us. I hope everything's okay for yourself in Canada with what's going on.
Yeah, surviving. We're experiencing the same sorts of things that's going on the rest of the world. I would say in Western Canada, we're a little bit more spread out. Population is not as dense as certainly as the UK and a lot of mainland Europe. So our instances of the virus aren't as great. At the same time, it is everywhere. So we do experience it, and looking forward to as the year goes on. People getting healthy and vaccinated and returning to some normality.
Indeed. Well, I'm glad everything's okay for yourself and your family.
Thanks.
Today, I'd like to look back on your footballing career a little bit. For fans of my generation, we obviously remember you from Chelsea and for your exploits being sort of an attacking midfield maestro for the club. Good memories for yourself when you look back on that era of your life?
Oh, the Chelsea era was great. Being part of the Kings Road Revolution, as I call it, under Glenn Hoddle. I loved playing for Chelsea. It was a great time in my career. I just captained Newcastle to promotion to the Premier League, and Glenn Hoddle, who'd been interested in me for a little while when he was Swindon manager, and I was at Newcastle, then got the Chelsea job, and the timing was just perfect for me to move back to London and to come under Glenn, who really just changed the whole culture of football at the club. And although we didn't win things, we got to the cup final, the FA Cup final first season. We got to the European Cup semi-final second season, again to the FA Cup semi-final the next season or quarter-final. So he began to change the culture and then build a different style. And then he brought in, obviously, Gullit and Hughes and Petrescu. And so I found that, Kevin Keegan said to me when I joined Chelsea that he said, you're going from one big club to another. He said, and you'll learn more from playing with Glenn Hoddle in training than anything else. And his first season, he was player manager. And just to play with Glenn was an education.
I don't think it's only fair to talk about your story that we look a little bit on your upbringing and stuff. So what area would you have been brought up in?
I was brought up just on the edge of southeast London, just into Kent, in Welling area. My dad, Keith, was a professional footballer for Charlton Athletic. So we lived in Welling. It was literally, for him, about under 10 minutes to get to the training ground at Charlton. And I was brought up in a footballing family. Mum, dad, my sister, Lauren, who's a couple of years younger than me. And I grew up around the smell of the dressing room and going down to the valley and watching my dad, who captained Charlton. He was a one-club man, so he's made the most outfield appearances for Charlton in their history. The only other player that's played more times is Sam Bartram, who was a goalkeeper. My dad also the first substitute ever used in English League football. Played so many games for Charlton, and it was just great to have that example. And mix with the players, and lots of the players, them and their wives would come babysit me and my sister, so I knew them personally. And as I grew and started to kind of kick a ball around with my dad's coaching and their example, they'd have a bit of banter with me and encourage me, and so really all I ever thought about doing was following in my dad's footsteps. Although I did work hard at school and ended up going to a grammar school in the end, but loved my home life. Great mum and dad, very loyal sister, and even a little jaunt in 2 years in the USA after my dad finished playing at Charlton and was the assistant coach of the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And at 12 years old, I was living in Tampa Bay, Florida, watching. It was the NASL then, the North American Soccer League, and Pele was in the league, and Johan Cruyff, Beckenbauer, George Best, and I was watching these players up close and personal week after week. So that only stirred me to sort of copy their skills and want to be a player even more. And then coming back to the UK when I was 15, then I sort of sprung on, became an England schoolboy, And then sort of most clubs in the country wanted to sign me.
See, when you're playing for the England schoolboys, are scouts actively coming to every game to watch you boys at that stage? Would there be a lot of interest, not just you, but in the whole squad?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because now the scouting systems at the top clubs, I mean, they're looking at boys, you know, when they're like 6, 7, 8 years old all around the world. Whereas then it was really until you got to district, maybe county level, then the clubs would start coming around. I remember West Ham scout Mike Dove giving me my dad his card after one game I played for Kent County when I was 14, you know. My dad stopped me signing for any club. You're playing enough football, just develop your school, you're playing for district. And then England's schoolboys came and all the other boys were signed up. My roommate was Michael Thomas, so he was at Arsenal. And Kevin Pressman was, you know, Sheffield Wednesday and the different ones. But I was the only player in the squad, I think, that wasn't signed as a schoolboy with a club then. And so really all the clubs were looking at me. But of course, they're, you know, at that, when you get to that level, and even before, the clubs are looking at the best boys in the country and wanting to get them on their books and hopefully, you know, tempt them to sign. But even when you do, I ended up signing for Queen's Park Rangers. I had Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa, but Venables was the manager at Rangers. They had a plastic pitch, first in the top division, and they had a great reputation of bringing young players through. So even though I signed for them, got a 3-year contract, that was when the work began. Because there's no guarantee you're going to actually really make it. You have to put in the work, and that's it's a different ballgame once you join the world of professional football from school.
What was Terry Venables like? What was he like as a manager, as a young player? Do you have much interactions with him coming through at Queen's Park Rangers?
Yeah, it was with Venables. I wasn't there. He wasn't there that long. I signed, had a pre-season with him, and of course he went to Barcelona. He pulled me into a few first-team sessions, even as a 15-year-old. So he liked me clearly, but it was bright, very shrewd, interacted well with the players. Players obviously liked playing for him. Had an ability to handle big names, different types of characters. And that's why he did so well with Gaza when Gaza went to Spurs under him. So I was really kind of not under Venables and not even getting into the first team when Venables was at QPR because I was young and he went off to Barcelona. He did, when I was at Chelsea, pull me into 2 England training squads. So I was close to a full England cap under Venables, and even going to join the England training squads for a few days there, just playing in his sessions was great because at that time he was playing the Christmas tree formation with the one striker down the middle, and he put me into a game, and it was, I think Teddy Sheringham was down the middle, and it was me and Beardsley in that inside forward role. I just loved it. And he just said, you know, it was great. I mean, I'm nervous coming into the England squad, you know, it's a big step. And even though they're players you've played against, and he just pulled me aside and, you know, just calmed your nerves, just different class, just go out there, just do what you've been doing for Chelsea all season. He said, but even better in this little niche I've put you in. I had a bit of a blinder in this training session. I was thinking, gosh, you know, I might get in. And it was only the fact, I think, that we had the FA Cup final coming up a couple of weeks later in 1994 that Glenn didn't let me join he wanted to play me in an England B international. But just in that training game, I could see, I'd have loved to have played for Venables at club level, obviously at England level, but at club level in the top flight. Great manager.
See, when you're breaking into the team at Queen's Park Rangers and making your debut, who were the big characters in that changing room? Who was in control of the dressing room at Queen's Park Rangers?
The man who controlled the dressing room was Terry Fennick. He was my first captain, obviously England player as well. Northeast boy, tough as nails, Fen. He was a Venables man. Venables loved Fennick because he was a general on the field. He didn't mess about either. He nailed people in the tackle. Good leader. And in those days, James, you know, the older pros ran the dressing room. there was no cheek and chirping, or if there was from the younger players, you know, the dressing room door would be shut and you get clipped round the ear. Not that I'm advocating violence in any way, but you know what I mean. It was old school. You earned your stripes. Like all of us as apprentices, myself, Gavin Maguire was a player that came through with me. We'd go in, head down. You'd clear up all the dirty kit, get it in a bag. You get the players' boots. You clean the boots and make sure you did a good job. And then you might get £5. Go down the local shop and buy some Lucozades and drinks for the first team players, and you know, get one for yourself if you like. You know, you're a good lad. And so I think there was a healthy fear that the younger players had of the older players in terms of a respect and earning of the stripes. Fennick ran the dressing room. Sammy Lee was there then, the ex-Liverpool England player, had joined us, and I loved Sammy. Pulled me under his wing. He used to really encourage me when I was playing for the reserves. I roomed with him on my first away trip with the first team, and he made me think of how important it is for older players to mentor younger players, and for first team players to give a bit of time to the youth players, and what it means to a youth player when that happens. The kind of passing on the baton thing, which can be lost a little bit when you're earning 50, 60, 78,000 pounds a week, and there's a distance between that first team squad and the reserves, let alone the youth team. So huge respect for Fen. Names like Fennick, Sammy Lee, Gary Bannister, Mike Fillery, you know, Clive Walker. These are all players that were in and around the first team. And there was myself coming through, Gavin Maguire, and a young Les Ferdinand and Jimmy Carter. So there was a few players that came through that era.
What was your debut like for Queen's Park Rangers? Do you remember it? What do you remember?
I do, yeah. I just turned 19. Sheffield Wednesday at home, up against Gary Megson in midfield. I was that day. And Jim Smith was the manager at QPR. So Venables, when I came in, Alan Mullery came in, didn't work out for Alan too well, and then in came Jim, and Jim had been doing really well at Oxford. And my dad was manager of Gillingham at the time. So my dad retired from playing and got into the management, Gillingham manager, and he'd had a few battles with Jim, knew Jim really well. He said, he's got Jim Smith as manager. He said, Gavin, he does like to shout at players a little bit. He said, but he knows his football. And I was a bit nervous of Jim because he's the bald eagle, you know, not much hair on his head, and he kind of growl at you. He's a Yorkshire accent, and you know, he just pulled me into his room a week before my debut. He said, "You're doing well." He said, "You're not far off the first team." Like this, and I didn't know whether he was telling me off or praising me. He's just growling at me, and then the next week I'm in the first team, and you know, I remember, you know, going there, and you're in the, you know, you're in with the first team, and this is what it's about, and the buzz and the crowd begin to build outside, and Jim's pacing around the dressing room, and don't give the ball away. Don't give the ball away. And used to bead of sweat used to form on his top lip when he, don't give the ball away. And I wasn't worried about giving the ball away until Jim started growling and shouting. And so then, you know, the other lads are in there and they calm the nerves a bit. And once it kicked off, the first thing that really hit me in terms of first team football, it was top level football in the top division, was the speed. Everything's done at just greater speed and intensity. And so to get that first ball, control pass, ripple, you know, applause from the loft end, nerves calmed a little bit, and I got into the pace of the game. I did quite well. I came really close to scoring, diving header in the first half, just past the post, skinned. Obviously, every time you dive on the plastic pitch, you skin your knee or hip, and ran my legs off. After 70 minutes, I got cramp and came off to an ovation, and that was it. You know. Done my first game, and it was a great feeling, relief, and all of those things. But I knew that then to stay there was the real work.
One of the players you came through with was Les Ferdinand. Went on to have a fantastic career.
Yeah.
What was a young Les Ferdinand like? What was he like to be around, and what was his hunger and drive like as a young man?
Yeah, Les was always a very humble man, and I'm still in touch a little bit with Les today. And one of the things I love about Les is he never, for all of his great success now, he's never changed from that lad that came from Hayes as a 19, 20-year-old. So he was always humble, which meant he was teachable, which was one of the great reasons he did so well. He was raw. I remember the physio Dave Butler saying, "We've just signed a lad, and he looks like he's built like Mike Tyson." He said he is absolutely ripped, and he was. Of course, he's got this great build, but he was quick and he could jump. So it was a little bit raw. It took him time on the plastic pitch because your technique had to be really good on that thing. But the potential was there all along. And Les, was physically ahead of the likes of myself because he could just hold, had man strength already. No surprise he did as well as he did in the game. And just good mate to be around, good to play with, obviously, because he'd get your goals and he was a threat. An all-round great player, good man.
Most of us will play for our dads at some point, but it's normally under 10 level. You then went out on loan to Gillingham and played under your dad. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, it was a good experience. It was bittersweet, I would say. I at this stage, I'm an England under-19 international. I'm making appearances in the first team at QPR. I've got a 3-year contract, a new 3-year contract there. I wasn't playing regularly. It was only 2 subs in those days, and they were playing me out wide midfield quite a bit, and I didn't like it. So I think a combination of a little bit of impatience from me and the position I was being sort of groomed for, I was really desperate to play in the middle of midfield. And then I'm living at home at the time. I'm dad's manager at Gillingham, and we're sitting at breakfast one morning, and he's just looking at me, and he says, "You know what?" He said, "I've got some injury problems in midfield. How do you fancy coming on loan?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to, Dad." So over Weetabix, we decided that I would come on loan, as obviously Dad had to speak to Jim Smith, and I went there on loan, and I had a great month. My dad said to me, now the difficult thing is when you play for your dad is, you're the son of the manager. So I think a few things, you have to have a bit of wisdom. My dad said to me, "Listen, I'm not going to overpraise you. If anything, I'll underpraise you in front of the lads. If I've got other things to say to you, I might say to you at home." He said, "I'll give you 2 bad games, and then I'm dropping you. And the rest of it's up to you." And I think, that was good. So the other lads saw that he didn't favour me. And also, I think if you play for your dad, you've got to be one of the best players in the team. Because if you're anything less than that, then, well, what's it? It's just favouritism. And I was, I came in, and the players at Gillingham could see straight away that, I was one of the best, if not the best in the team. So at 19 now, I'm playing in the 3rd division. Well, it's a gamble that I took, really. At that stage, it was only on loan, but I did well for that month. And then my dad got me for 40 grand with a sell-on percentage or whatever that QPR might get. I think 18 months later, the club sold me for a record 250 grand to Bournemouth. So they made a good deal out of it. But then I'm now in the 3rd division, and my aim was to go play games and come back up, but to establish myself as a central midfield player that maybe could get a goal as well. And that experience of playing week in and week out in first team football, not reserve football, it was men's football. Gillingham tried to play a little bit in that division as well. Just really, I learned a lot in that time, so that when I did go to Bournemouth 18 months later, to Harry Redknapp, the division up, I was a much better player. The bittersweet nature of the thing with my dad was that after a few months, my dad got the sack. I think the club panicked after a couple of bad results, and there was no need to sack him. He'd done so well there in 6 years. The likes of Steve Bruce and Tony Cascarino came through under my dad. But that was the difficult thing. Dad then sacked. I'm staying on, playing for the directors that did the bad decision on him. But I decided to stay there and come to achieve what I wanted to achieve, and that was to springboard on.
Well, the springboard worked because you then moved to the south coast to Bournemouth. Harry Redknapp, as you mentioned, paying 250k for you, quite a big transfer fee for a player in Division 3 as well. Clubs are reluctant to pay a fee for players in the lower tier. Quite big money. How did you settle initially in the South Coast?
Yeah, that you're right about the fee. So I go there. Ian Bishop had been the star midfielder for them. He'd gone to Man City, and so Harry was looking for a midfielder to replace him. I got married that summer, so it was married life, new club, new area to live on the South Coast. I really enjoyed playing for Harry. He's as he is, as people see him on the television, is what Harry is. He's a great personality, forceful, but encouraging, like to play good football. You have a row with you, tell you where it's at, but didn't hold a grudge. The unfortunate thing was, and we had players, Luther Blissett was there, Paul Miller, the ex-Tottenham player, Sean Teal, who went on to play for Aston Villa. With some good players in the team, but we got massive injuries that season. And as the season went on, we slipped into the relegation zone. We just couldn't get the injuries back fit. And we ended up getting relegated. Final nail in the coffin, Leeds at home. And they, with the Strachan and, Lee Chapman, Vinnie Jones, they went up that day and we won the championship. We've gone down. So a good time I played 55 games that year, but a bad time because I was back where I started, and my whole aim to sort of come back up was now I've got one step forward, one step back. So I kind of made it known to Harry that, if a chance comes, Harry, I'll give everything for Bournemouth, but I'd love the chance to sort of go up again. And if it happens, I started the next season quite well, 1990, and then Newcastle came in.
Now, a big part of your family are from the Northeast. I know that's from your dad's side as well, quite interestingly enough. Did that have any bearing on you wanting to sign for Newcastle? I know on a career trajectory, it made a lot of sense, I'm guessing, but did that have any bearing on your decision?
It just, I was brought up, it's interesting, my first ever kit was Newcastle. My dad played for Charlton, but I got a Newcastle kit. His mum and dad, my granddad Tom and my grandma Lydia, they're from South Shields. My granddad was a Geordie. He grew up around St James's in the times of Jackie Milburn and Hughie Gallagher. So we'd go up for holidays, and I'd all my cousins up there. And Super Mac was, Malcolm McDonald was the star back in the 70s, and I had a Super Mac T-shirt. I got a picture of me playing with my cousins on the heath up there in the northeast, with my Newcastle kit. And so that was, and my dad even, that was his team. Obviously Charlton was, but after Charlton. So when they came in, it was just everything was right about it. And so big club, and Jim Smith, my manager at QPR, had given him a first team debut, had made his way to Newcastle by then and still kept an eye on me and wanting to buy me. So that was a tie as well. But of course, my granddad couldn't believe it when I signed for his boyhood club. And he said to me, he said, these fans will forgive you many mistakes on the field if you sweat blood for their team, because if they could pull on that black and white jersey, they would. I never forgot that. And I think that was a thing that got me a great relationship with the Newcastle fans. And I did well personally on the field in that sort of almost 3 years I was there.
Newcastle, such a big football city.
Yeah.
In Newcastle, is everything magnified? So if the players go out for a night out, for instance, the whole sort of city will know about it. Oh,
yeah. Like the players' pictures, photographs are actually on the walls of the nightclubs as you go in. Not that I was a clubber, but my wife and I would go out, and fans would come up to you all the time, whether we went out to a restaurant or a bar, or I remember us going to the pictures one night, and we've gone in off the main street, and we're standing there at the kiosk paying, And a bunch of Newcastle fans had seen me, probably about 5, 6 lads. They'd seen us go in, and they're standing at the door chanting. There's only one, Gavin Peacock. They're chanting. And it was kind of weird and embarrassing. But then until I went over and said hello to them, they wouldn't stop chanting. And, just little things like that is just different. I would get recognised, Chelsea player in and around London. You'd always get recognised when you were out. But it wasn't with that same fervour, because there's other things going on in London. But for Newcastle, it's the team. And the players really are heroes. And that can be great, but it is also a goldfish bowl, because you feel that pressure and a responsibility. The other thing is that, it's a working class area. It's tough. These people, they pay their hard-earned money to watch Newcastle. I travelled back from one away game on the train with some of the supporters, and one fella said to me, I could have paid my mortgage off 10 years ago with the money that I've spent travelling around watching Newcastle. I thought, wow, that sort of hits home. If they're paying their money to see the players, at least the players can do is give 100% and acknowledge the fans on the field. So I always used to go and clap the fans, win, lose or draw, which was hard when you didn't play well and, you lost. But I'd think, well, it's the least you could do, really. One fellow owned a social club up in Newcastle said to me, Gavin, you don't realise if the team does well, he said the whole town is lifted. He said everyone's out on a Saturday, the economy goes up, people have a bit more buzz about them, they're a bit more motivated to work hard, so productivity goes up in the week. All these little things you maybe don't realise what the club means to that town. And it's about respect, it's about honour, it's about a feeling of belonging, and it's about love for your city and love for the game, There
was the big characters in the Newcastle dressing room at that time. Who was running things there?
Well, at the firstly, when I went in, big characters would have been Roy Aitken, ex, Scotland captain, Mickey Quinn, Mark McGee, Ray Ranson, John Burridge, the goalkeeper, just what a character he was. Budgie we called him, and Budgie he was a brilliant professional. Fantastic physique, like older then, he's well into his 30s, kept himself in great shape, but was absolute nut job. And he loved football, and he just lived being a goalkeeper, to the point where anyone who roomed with him on an away trip would say, like, he wanders around the room with his gloves on and his boxer shorts on a Friday night. He says, and he gets me to throw him an orange, and he dives on the bed and catches the orange like he's practicing for the next day. So, man, absolute nutter, but great banter. There was one time where we were at Brighton, playing away at Brighton, staying in a hotel, and like silly things like John Burridge and Mickey Quinn staged a fight in the reception of the hotel. They were messing around, but they got one of them wore an old shirt, so it ripped easy, and they ripped his shirt off, and it was all going off, and all the hotel staff were up in arms, and then they were, it's just the kind of banter that the lads did just to keep the, spirits up, diffuse a bit of nervous energy, and just because they couldn't think of anything better to do. But big characters, experienced players there, and then as time went on, we had a period where we were bringing a few young players through, and then the season we did get promoted. The likes of Barry Venison came in, Paul Bracewell, who were strong characters, John Beresford, who helped really drive us in my third season at Newcastle to Premiership.
Now, the first time working with Jim Smith, you were quite young, so I'm guessing he wouldn't have been as full on with you. The second time working with him, you're a mature, established professional by this point. How was he with you at this? Was he as harsh? Was he harsher than he had been before? What were your thoughts on that?
I think he was the same, but I wasn't as nervous of him. When I was 19, I was nervous, and he kind of knocked me a little bit with my confidence. Though he gave me confidence to play, there was a little bit of that. But when I've come back, to him, I was 23 and I've played all these games now. I wasn't put off by Jim if he growled or moaned at me or anything like that. And, now and again, I'd I wasn't disrespectful to him, but if he was wrong, I would maybe say back to him a few times. But I had huge respect for Jim, and deep down, he's a very, very decent man, gentleman Jim. And I owe a lot to Jim Smith in my football career for showing faith in me, and for giving me opportunities, and for being a good football man that he was. So I think I looked, I was more mature in my second spell under Jim. I could appreciate his skill as a manager, maybe better. And he did well for Newcastle, but when he'd been there a little while longer, he almost got promotion with them. He ended up, getting the sack, as is the case if you don't produce, and especially with Newcastle. And so after a little while of, after I signed for Newcastle, Jim, he actually called me up to say he'd been sacked. But one thing I do remember signing for Newcastle was my dad and I met with Jim on at Nottingham Forest. Well, before Nottingham Forest game that Newcastle were playing in, the idea was we meet with Jim. So Harry Redknapp says, Jim Smith's coming for you at Newcastle. They're playing at Notts Forest in a cup game. Drive up to Nottingham. You meet Jim in the hotel with your dad, do the deal, watch the game, and then drive up with the players afterwards, and you'll be back in Newcastle and you can sign the contract. Dad and I met with Jim. Dad and Jim are mates. They did the deal. I'm happy. It's a 3-year deal. They give me a significant increase in my money. Watch the game, travel up. I stay at Jim's house overnight. He drives me to St James's Park the next morning to sign the contract. I'm in Jim's office, and he comes waiting, and he says, Gavin, the board have said I've given you too much money. It wasn't that much money, but in those days you're talking about hundreds of pounds. They're doing you too much. I've got to cut the money down. And I'm like, is that a tactic? Get the young lad on his own back at the club. He'll just sign the deal. What do? I've rung my dad. He's out training with Gillingham. I rang Brendan Batson at the PFA, and I said, Brendan, this is the thing. He said, well, they might be trying it on. He said, oh, what do you think? And then it came to me. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say I'll sign for the lesser amount, but I'm only going to sign for 18 months, like the rest of this season and one more year. And Brendan said, well, that's a gamble, because you get injured or don't do well, you're losing out another 2 years of your contract you could be on. He said they'll never go for it anyway, because the whole deal was probably worth $250,000 to Newcastle. So I said, no, I'm going to go for it. Jim came back in the office. I said, I'll sign for your lesser amount, but only for 18 months. Jim said, done. I signed the contract. It was the best contract I signed, because within 18 months, within a year, I'd taken off. Yeah. And they were banging down the door when Kevin Keegan finally joined for me to sign another contract. I had all sorts of clubs interested in me. So it worked out with the best contract I signed in terms of springing me on. But just a weird situation with Jim there. And, how he agreed to that, I do not know. But one of the game's great characters, did a lot for me, Jim Smith.
With Jim Smith's tenure ending, I believe Ozzy Ardiles was in for a little while before Kevin Keegan. What was the Ozzy Ardiles spell like at Newcastle?
Yeah, Ozzy was great to play for. What a great guy. What a brilliant footballer. This guy was Maradona's mentor. Won the World Cup in 1978. He was a legend. Glenn Hoddle talks about Ozzy as just a phenomenal football brain. It's very unusual midfield player. No, nothing quite like him in the top flight. When you watched him, when you look back at Ozzy's games for Tottenham, he'd been manager at Swindon and been playing this kind of wing-back system and the diamond in midfield. And he quite liked me as a player when he'd seen me, and he pulled me in aside and said, you're like a diamond, you've got some rough edges. He said, but I'll polish them off. He said, you'll take off. He said, I'm going to play you in the diamond system as the head of the diamond. So just behind the front two. And that so suited me. And Ozzy let you play without fear. You would just go on that field and you would express yourself. So he was great in that respect for players. He brought through young players like Steve Howie and Lee Clark. I was just a tad older than those, but still, you know, at 22, 23, I was still fairly young. The problem was we didn't have enough experience, and especially at the back, and we were leaking goals. You know, so we'd lose 5-4 or something like that. Some great football, but just leaking too many goals. In the end, then Ozzy, they had to let him go. Everyone was sad. Even the board that sacked him loved, almost tears in their eyes, because he was such a great guy. Needs a lot of credit because of the players that came through under Ozzy, Steve Watson and Lee Clark and Howie, Alan Thompson. They all went on to have great careers at the top level, and Ozzy was instrumental in that. But it was just he didn't have the players and of experience at the time.
With Ozzy's departure, Keegan comes in.
Yeah.
One of the game's big characters, massive reputation. What was your first impressions of Kevin Keegan?
I was, sad that Ozzy left, and then I'm driving home and I listening to the BBC Radio Newcastle, and I hear we've signed Kevin Keegan, and so immediately sort of couldn't believe it. You know, he was a poster on my bedroom wall as a kid, a hero. One of football's first millionaires, you know, in terms of could retire, and he did. He went and lived in Marbella for 7 years and flew back from Marbella to Newcastle straight off the golf course, playing with Sean Connery and those guys. He's a massive personality, a leader of men, and just said to us at the first training session, any of you want to leave this club, come and see me afterwards and I will make it happen. But if you want to stay, he said, we will survive this season and then watch us take off. And he didn't know a lot about the league because he'd been away for so long, but he knew how to motivate players, and he watched some videos, and he was a great motivator of men. And I tell the story of his first game, Bristol City at home, 30,000 plus Geordies there, packed the stadium. They locked 5,000 out. They were there to see Keegan, and he's going around the dressing room before, and I see him speaking to the different players, and then he gets to me, he says, today you're the man. He said, you're the man. He said, Bill Shankly said to me, just go out there and drop hand grenades all over the pitch. In other words, just go out there and cause trouble wherever you go. And I've been banging in goals that season. And I thought, wow, like, you know, Keegan's my hero, and Shankly was his hero. And if Shankly's saying that to Keegan and Keegan's saying that to me, I burst out that tunnel, I ran all day. Didn't score, but I made 2 goals for David Kelly. We won 3-0. And I always say to people, you know, years later, I was saying, Keegan's a great motivator of men. And when he finally got the England job, Paul Scholes scored a hat-trick on Kevin Keegan's England debut. I think it was Poland at Wembley. And he said in the paper the next day, Kevin Keegan's a great motivator of men. And I read it and I thought, yes, that's exactly what I've been saying. And then I read on, and Scholes said, he said to me in the dressing room before the game, Bill Shankly used to say to me, just go out there and drop hand grenades all over the field. And I was like, I thought I was special. but he just, you know, Scholes, he's a goal scoring midfielder. That's the kind of thing that will work with him. With other players, he would do different things. So that was his great skill. He was a magnetic personality. We survived his first season there because we were in a bit of trouble, but we survived. And the next season, we played some of the best football, if not the best football I've been involved with in any team I played for in my career. The season we went up to Premier League.
Who was playing up front? I know you're playing in the pivot of the diamond, or the point of the diamond system. Who was playing up front in that system with you?
Well, if I was playing behind, it could be Mick Quinn and David Kelly. And then Keegan pushed me even further forward. And I played up front with David Kelly for the best part of the promotion season. And Lee Clark played behind us. So that was the way it worked. And then Rob Lee came in on the right side of midfield. And then Andy Cole came in as a striker for the last few months of the season. I got an injury as well then. So that I spent a lot of my last season at QPR up front. But strikers, David Kelly, Mick Quinn, I learned a lot from playing with Mick Quinn. He was a true number 9. They would be the 2 strikers that, and Andy Hunt was there for a little while, but the 2 strikers that was up front most for Newcastle when I was there would be those two, and they both had great goal scoring records for Newcastle.
Who would you say, other than yourself, was influential in that team to Newcastle's promotional push into the Premier League?
David Kelly's goals, alongside mine. I think between us we scored 40 goals plus. Robert Lee was still, I think Keegan says, it was his best pound for pound signing. 750 grand, I think, got it from Charlton. I think those players. Lee Clark was mercurial that season. And then the likes of Steve Howie came in at centre back and was rock solid. Barry Venison and Barry Venison and Beresford, the fullbacks. There was sort of stars all over. Kelly and I got the headlines a lot because of the goals. I forget who got player of the season actually that season, but it was a difficult one to pick out the best player because everyone in the team just had outstanding season. And that's why it was a machine we played. I look back at some of those games there and think, boy, that football we played there would have graced any stage, any level.
What was it like when you guys got promoted? What was the big celebrations like? What was Kevin Keegan like, and what went on with your guys' party? It
was a great day. We got promotion, actually sealed it Grimsby away. So it was, you're at Grimsby, it's a bit grim. It was a night game. So it wasn't the stage for the greatest celebration. Apart from David Kelly pouring a whole tub of Gatorade over Kevin Keegan in his suit in the dressing room, which I don't think Keegan liked, but we all cracked up. But the next week, we were playing Leicester at home, and we were champions. And the season before, we played Leicester to avoid relegation, so a turnaround in a year. And we won 7-1, I think it was. And, it was just a party. The whole day, the whole stadium packed. And then 2 days later, we had an open-top bus ride around the city centre. 100,000 Geordies lined the city centre, reception at the town hall. And so you were just on a buzz and on a high for days. And if it means, every football club, it means so much to the fans. But like I've said before, there's something special about Newcastle.
What happened in the summer? Did Keegan bring in an influx of new players, or did he trust the core of the squad that he had?
He knew going up to the Premier League that he wanted to make some changes. Kelly sold to Wolves, and he brought in Beardsley. He was looking to bring in, I don't know, he brought in loads in the summer. I can't remember exactly, but that was the summer I left. The only reason I left, actually, or what precipitated it was the birth of my son. So a couple of weeks after that open-top bus ride, my wife had been pregnant with our first child, and it was quite a tough labour. Couple of days she was in labour, etc. And then he was born, but he was born without his right hand. And we'd only had one scan in those days, so we didn't show on the scan and with the way he was lying. So it was a big shock. He's got a third of his forearm, and, what's going on? Are there other issues they check for and all of this? And it made us think about moving back to our family in London. It was quite the trauma, really. And Keegan was on the phone to me a lot and, very compassionate. And I said, Gaffer, look, I think, my wife would be happier in London. It's been tough, and I still don't want to leave Newcastle. But he said, look, if your wife's not happy, you won't be happy, and you won't play your best football. I don't want you to leave. I'll bring Beardsley in. I think you could work well together, you, Beardsley, and Cole, and Andy Cole. He said, one thing I won't outprice you in the market. And then Glenn got the Chelsea job, and I was his first signing, 1.25 million, which was significant signing fee then.
So you're now working under another massively high-profile ex-player turned manager in Glenn Hoddle. Yeah. Someone whose really methods at the time was seen as quite groundbreaking in the scale of things. First impressions of Glenn Hoddle, how did you initially take to Glenn?
I loved Glenn, start to finish. Very nice man, good man, personable. And again, shown a lot of faith in me, signed me for that amount of money, played me in a role that let me get forward and create, believed in my ability, made me a better player. And he was a visionary on the field, but also off the field. He saw pictures on the field that no one else saw, and he saw pictures off the field. So, changed the culture at the training ground where we trained. We would eat tea and biscuits after training. There was a biscuit rota, and you were on it once a week. And Dennis Wisey, who was club captain at the time, would call you up if you were on that rota. Say, Peacock, make sure the biscuits are good today. Hobnobs, no cheap stuff. Else you're on a double rota next week. So he's bringing these pile of biscuits. You're professional with Premier League players. Fly around, do all your fitness, and then come in and just dunking biscuits in the tea. Glenn came in, he went, nah, none of that. I mean, this is Glenn that played under Wenger at Monaco. And he said, well, none of that in the dressing room. I'm bringing in a chef, and you'll have to stay for lunch. So this was good. I was a married man. My wife was cooking me decent food at home, but a lot of the young, single lads, they're going to eat McDonald's on the way back and getting good food in us. He brought in, a masseur, reflexologist. We did a few double sessions, don't do a double session, that kind of thing. Taught us to play the diamond system with the players that he had. And then gradually, as each year went on, got better and better players in. So what Glenn did there was just quite remarkable. And no surprise he got the England job. One of the best football minds in the last half a century in the game, should still be involved, I say, at the top level of management. Was a tragedy that he was sacked for off the field views that should never have been an issue. Did well for England, and Robert Lee, who I speak to a little bit, said he played for Glenn in England, just a phenomenal brain. Like, he would say things to us. He said, you play in Portugal, and he'd say, if you go there, there, and there, he said, they will come out and you'll steal the ball, you'll slip it to Shearer, and Shearer will be, he said, it just come true, His vision at world level he was just made for the top stage. So one of the great privileges of my career was playing for Glenn, obviously, at such a great club as Chelsea.
It must have been a dream come true, playing for one of the greatest attacking midfielders England arguably have ever had in an attacking midfield role.
Yeah, Glenn was different to me. He's way better than me, and didn't score. He scored great goals. He wasn't a great goal scorer, but like when Glenn had the ball, when he was player manager for his first season, you would just make a run and it would be coming round your right ear hole at the perfect pace and just drop in front of you. And then he would give you little tips, off to the side and watch you in training and, tell you different things to do. I've just been recently in touch with him, and, he complimented me and my time under him and said I was one of his best free signings that he'd made. And so we had a good rapport, clearly, and I respected Glenn very highly indeed.
Your form showed, no doubt. You scored home and away against Manchester United that season, which is a massive thing to do. Is that a highlight for your season that year, bagging against them in such big games?
Yeah, I think so. Early on at Stamford Bridge, I got the goal. We won 1-0. I remember, going out for dinner with my wife in London that night, and the papers come out late at night, like the Sunday papers come out before midnight on the street, and I saw my name, but it was on the front page, so up the top, a little header. I said, wow, this is like winner against Man United. He gets a little bit of a front page headline. And then we went up there later in the season, and I'd never played at Old Trafford before, and it was huge. And Glenn said, you might get one opportunity. We keep it tight against them. We'll play on the break. If we get the opportunity, we've got to stick it away. And it was me that it fell to, and I stuck it away, and it was the double. And not many people do that. 1-0, 1-0, and you're the guy that scores the goal. And people do remember me. I mean, I did other things at Chelsea and in my career, but that's you do a double against Manchester United. It's something that people do remember because it's rarely done.
Glenn listed yourself in his top 3 signings. From your point of view, what signings did you rate that Glenn brought in at your time at Chelsea?
Probably a lot better than me. Well, we signed Gullit and Mark Hughes, who were obviously great players. Gullit was world class. I mean, he was past his best when he came to us, but he was still better than everyone else around. And Hughes the same, really. Past the best, but still a good players. And playing with both of them, and in particular, I really liked Mark Hughes. I sit next to him on the coach. He was just a down-to-earth guy, hard as nails on the field, great target man, number 9, great player. Gullit was just world class. Everything he did, he seemed to, do with such style as well. I remember my dad watching us at Stamford Bridge one day. He said, "You and Ruud," he said, both gave the ball away too much today. He said, "It's just that Ruud did it with much more style than you did." I said, "Oh, thanks, Dad." And he was, 6 foot plus, brilliant physique. He could run. It was like jump. It was like he could leap over small buildings. And he would just hold off 2 or 3 players on the field and make goals and score goals. And Chelsea wasn't, AC Milan, and he knew that. But again, the likes of Gullit, signed by Glenn, was inspirational to take us to another level. And then you start to attract bigger name players. And we played Middlesbrough at home in Glenn's final season, so 95-96 season. And I scored a hat-trick. We won 5-0. It was the first Premier League hat-trick scored by any player, because the Premier League had only been running a few years. It wasn't the first hat-trick for Chelsea at the top level. It was the first Premiership hat-trick. And I remain one of 3 English players only to have scored a hat-trick for Chelsea in the Premier League. The others are Tammy Abraham and Frank Lampard. And I scored a hat-trick. But that day, Gullit was playing, and that day we played just brilliant football. And it was as if Glenn's vision came true on that day. And he said to us in the dressing room, "That is what we need to be like all the time." We played the wing-back system and everything. We just destroyed Middlesbrough, and it was just beautiful to watch. Gullit played brilliant that day.
At the time, I remember Ruud Gullit signing for Chelsea. I remember the impact. I remember the fans with the Ruud Gullit wigs. It was like quite a sort of magical moment for the Chelsea fans. Was there any funny stories involving Ruud Gullit at the time that you could share with us from that era and from that period?
Yeah, I mean, Ruud he loved the lads and the banter, and he got used to the kind of, dressing room banter, the London stuff and all of that. So he was good in that respect, he joined in as one of the lads. But I just remember one of the things with Ruud was that he was so stylish, like I said, but he, along with the other sort of players we signed from the continent there in Europe, they not only brought this style on the pitch, they brought a bit of style off the pitch. So we were like in our 1990 shell suits coming into training on jeans and scruffy, and they'd come in Armani and Hugo Boss, and they had the style, and as you dress is how you will play, that kind of thing. And I remember Ruud was sitting there after training once, and he's in the treatment room, he's having a massage, and you'd have to walk through the treatment room to get to the car park. And a few of us had come in our shell suits of jeans and sort of half scruffy kind of thing. We've come in through, and Ruud's lying there, like arms back on the treatment table, getting a massage, magnificent specimen of an athlete. And he says, it has occurred to me that 75% of English men cannot dress properly. And Frank Sinclair, our defender, turned around and said, "Well, I'm the other 10%. And we've gone, "Oh, Frank, you mean 25%? Frank's football skills were better than his math that day. But, Ruud was this icon on the field for his style of play, but also off the field, had a massive influence on the players in the dressing room because he was so good, and he had a big personality as well. His flaw, as all men are flawed, was when he was a manager. After Glenn left, he was the manager. a good teammate on the field, not a great manager. And he would put the team up one week, you'd be in it, and then next week you wouldn't be even on the bench, and he wouldn't speak to you, and there was a communication issue there. And he did that with me, and I went to speak to him about it. Things didn't change. He then ignored me, sort of played me in the reserves. We didn't even have a row. Sort of, I went to train with the youth team one day, and I'd been captain of Chelsea, played, a lot of games in 3 seasons there, and then sort of just ignored me. And then I knew it was my time to go. It was a bit sad, really, because if Glenn had stayed on, I'm sure I would have signed another contract for Chelsea. But when the manager comes in, different manager, different style. But his style was found out in Newcastle. He took Rob Lee. He didn't give him a number. He'd been the number 7 there for years. Alan Shearer fell out with. And these are good pros, and they both sort of said the same thing. So great player. Did win some silverware for Chelsea. Probably more positives than negatives, but that one negative was something that affected me to the point of leaving Chelsea.
Do you think some of the team found it frustrating that when Ruud Gullit was manager, he played himself in that sweeper system? Do you think it was quite frustrating to some of the other players in the team, whether they think Ruud was deserving of that starting spot or not?
Yeah, I mean, when he became manager there, I actually don't know how many games he played, because I was gone really sort of 3 months into the season. So I was maybe unaware of any sort of rumblings about Ruud and playing himself. I was aware of rumblings about his managerial style, because a few players, and I think Wisey even went around his house to say, Ruud, you've got to kind of change your style here with the players, you've got to speak to players. But in terms of his play on the field, he was coming to the end of his career anyway. And that's always player manager is very difficult. I mean, to be seeing everything and playing your own game, you've got to be, really good. I mean, Glenn did it for a year, but then he stepped back because he knew he couldn't continue it.
Do you think it was a level of arrogance from Ruud, or do you think it was a language communication barrier or a cultural difference? Why do you think the players found him so hard to deal with, in your honest answer?
My honest answer would be probably pride. There'll be some cultural stuff in there as well, but the pride would be the issue, because it's not like the thing wasn't pointed out to Ruud. I mean, we've all got pride, right? That we have to deal with, and I've had my own issues with it, and found, but it's a killer when you're not listening to other people that are telling you that there is a problem that they've seen with something you're doing, and then it behooves us to kind of listen to that, and we learn and change by it. So I would say that was probably the main thing. I don't know, hard feelings with Ruud. If I saw him and shake his hand, that's in the past. But I'd just be honest, that was the reason why I left Chelsea.
You initially went out on a short-term loan back to Queen's Park Rangers. Were you quite pleased to be going back to Queen's Park Rangers after such a long time away from the club you started out at?
I nearly signed for Strasbourg in the French First Division, and I was quite keen to try playing in abroad. Tony Cascarino had gone to Marseille and had a good, I was in touch with him. He loved life out in France, and French-German border there, Strasbourg. They wanted a number 10. I was looking at that, and QPR came in. I think Wolves were interested. They were in a fairly big team, obviously, but QPR was my old club, and they came calling, and Stuart Houston had taken over there. They'd just come out of the Premier League. They had some money, and they had Trevor Sinclair, Andy Impey, Alan McDonald, Simon Barker. So some good players in there, and they were interested in me and John Spencer. I thought, we go back there, go straight back up. It could be a good chance, and to do it with my club I started with. Great affection for QPR. So in the end, I decided to sign for QPR, and Spenny and I went there, and we were on fire. both of us, scoring goals. The team, we gave them a lift. Sinclair was, he was a match winner, and I thought, we could go back up here. We were just missed out on the playoffs that first season, and then things for Stuart Houston didn't work out so well. We had in the end sell Trevor Sinclair, and that was not great business for the club in terms of got to sell him, but you've lost a great player. John Spencer went to Everton, and so I was still there, and but I stayed on. Jerry Francis came in. I loved playing for Jerry. That's another great manager. We again came close to the playoffs, just missed out. Financial difficulties behind the scenes there. Jerry finally left. Ian Holloway came in, and by this time now, I've hung in there and stayed at the club I love. And I'm now, pushing 34. And Holloway, I was their best paid player in the club, was in administration at this point. I had a chance to go to Charlton on loan. My dad was assistant manager there to Alan Kirbishley. Back in the Premier League, weird. Mark Kinsella was injured. They wanted someone to come in that Curbs had liked me, bit of experience there as well. And he said, come, if you do well, we'll take over your contract. And I had a couple of appearances back in the Premier League, Everton, Ipswich away, did well, tore my calf muscle, fought back to fitness. Curbs couldn't sign me, at that age without me being, a proven fit for the rest of the season. So I went back to QPR. And in the end, did a deal on the final year of my contract because they were struggling. And I decided to call time on my career then, finishing with the club that I started with, 18 years and over 600 games. And it was just the right time to finish playing.
You played, I think, 183 league games for Queen's Park Rangers in your second stint.
Mm.
To return something back to the club, did you feel like that was you doing your part as well for the love and support they'd shown you early on in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many memories of QPR, from a 15-year-old walking in there to a 35-year-old walking out of there, that, I knew some of the fans by name. I swept the terraces and cleaned all the boots, and I've done everything at that club, played in every team. And so I felt a great love for QPR, and I think over you say 183 league games, I think over the whole span with Cup, it was maybe 250 games, whatever. I think if you look over that and goals I scored and performances, goals I made and performances, I think overall I did quite well for the team. Playing in a better team at QPR with other players around, I think would have been my dream, really, to play and we do something in the Premier League. But it wasn't to be. But nevertheless, that was my life and career, and I loved it at QPR.
Was it hard for you when you retired? I know you went into punditry. You was on Match of the Day and Match of the Day 2 for a little while. How did you find that transition of not playing, of not training, not needing to be in that routine? How did you handle that personally?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's tough at first. It's not easy, but at the same time, I think the fact that I'd had a full career, that I hadn't had major injuries, that I'm thinking, I lost 5 years of my career through injuries. No, full career. I think I was as good a player as I could be with the talent that I had. I was a good player, not the best player ever, but a good player. And it felt, so I had a good career, and everything comes to an end in football in that respect. So I could accept that. My identity was never tied up in football. Ultimately, I'm a Christian. I take my identity from Jesus Christ and not from football. So he's there after football. I knew that I'd be provided for, and so I was able then to take on this new career of media, work hard, enjoyed it. I knew I had to give insight. I wasn't the biggest name ever to come on the screen, so I knew I had to be good, not just tell the fans what they already knew. And it went really well for me for 6 years, to the point, like you say, I was on Match of the Day, Match of the Day 2. I was at the World Cups, and I was in that elite sort of team there, and loved my time at the BBC with the folks there, men and women there. and all the work that I did in a second dream career, really. You know, in fact, I was even more well known as when I was working for the BBC than I was playing, because your faces in people's living rooms on the, you know, TV in front of millions every week, maybe sometimes 2 or 3 times a week.
As well as working for the BBC, you also became a minister, which I know has been very important to yourself in your work for your church, based in Canada now. Coincidentally, while presenting for the BBC on the African Nation Tournament, you also presented songs of praise. Yeah. I'm sure this will be a question of sport question one day. Quite an interesting, very interesting experience for yourself.
Yeah, that was one. I remember that was one Sunday. I was on. My mum rang me up. Like you've been on 2 channels at the same time. I was on a pre-recorded BBC One Songs of Praise and the Africa Cup of Nations live on BBC Two. I was so busy in those days, what I was doing, and I was getting opportunities to present things as well, like the Songs of Praise stuff, but BBC would give me stuff. Obviously the call to ministry was something that I felt strongly and got affirmed by others in the church. I've been a Christian since I was 18 years old. You know, when I heard the gospel, and you know, football was my God. So if I played well, I was up. If I played bad, I was down. And I was wrestling as an 18-year-old with this. And then I came to the church, local church, one day and went back to a youth meeting. And there's all these young people in there that didn't have all the things that I had. I had the perfect life, the car, the money, the career. They spoke about Jesus Christ. And when they prayed, they had a joy I didn't have. And then the minister unpacked the gospel, the good news of what God has done to save people from their sins through Jesus Christ. And, you know, I realized my biggest problem wasn't get the approval of the crowd on the Saturday, but it was being a right relationship with the God who made me and against whom I'd sinned, but through whom Jesus, he provided forgiveness and new life, and to find my identity and purpose and goal in that, not football, was the key. But I'd never had, so all through my career, I was a Christian athlete and I'd spoken at certain things, but I'd never had a sense of desire to really be like a leader in the church, of preaching and teaching and leading the church, until when I was at the BBC. It was around about 2006, and I started to investigate this a bit more, did some studies, and then I said to my wife, I'm going to give it up. People will think I'm mad, but I'm going to give up the BBC for church ministry, and I did. Could have stayed in England, but thought about coming to anonymity in Canada, where no one knew me, just to hear what I said from the Bible. And in 2008, we left and thought I'd come back. I did some studies here, master's degree, thought we'd come back. And then I got offered a position at the church in Calgary. And now we've been here since 2008, 12 years. And my kids have grown and married, and they're all Christians. Them and their spouses are at the church with us. I have 2 children, Jake and Ava. And Amanda, my wife, and I live here, and we've been married 31 years now. So at the moment, we've got a grandchild on the way, due in a month, our first grandchild. And I love what I do. And at the moment, it looks like I'll be here, but never say never. I love England, and you never know, I may return one day.
If you could change one decision about your footballing career that you've made, or one decision that you didn't make, what would that decision be, Gav?
I think just to hit that ball in the FA Cup final slightly softer, so it dipped under the crossbar and went in against Peter Schmeichel 20 minutes into the FA Cup final. Because if that had gone in, 1994, we played them in the FA Cup final, I'd scored home and away in the league. And we were in the FA Cup final and we were doing really well first half. If that had gone in, we'd have been 1-0 up again. Peacock scored again. I think we'd have won the FA Cup. And that is the one decision that I could say to you that I would do different. But that was a split-second decision.
I've got to say, I thoroughly enjoyed spending some afternoon with you today. I know for the time zone in Canada, you've really gone out your way to help me and get yourself on the channel. It's been a great pleasure.
Enjoyed it.
I Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, James. Real pleasure.